So we just want to welcome both of you to the discussion today. And if it's okay with you, for this particular conversation, perhaps we can use our first names as we discuss African women driving change in their communities, if that's okay with both of you. Thank you for that. So perhaps we can start with you, Irene, our discussion. Maybe you can share a little bit about, first of all, maybe a bit about yourself, if there's more that we can hear from you, but we'd really like to hear your current roles in the secular world and or ministry world and how they specifically focus on women.
Thank you, Candida, and thank you for having me on this program. I was kind of humbled when you talking about who I am, my bio, and I realized that there's one thing that's actually missing that defines who I am, and that is the fact that everything that I have done, I've worked in the corporate world. I'm now working in different places to work, especially with women, but everything that I have done it as part of my call to ministry, whether I was in the corporate world or I am teaching at SATS or Rema. I use the same lens. I place God in the center. And so if I were to describe myself today, I would say that I am a business coach. I do help people with businesses. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a critical thinker, and I'm not just describing what I am, but the kinds of things that I try and facilitate for others to be as well. I am also an author, and as we have said before, I teach. But I want to also say that all of this, I do it because I believe God has called me to do that. I'm a mother, and that is particularly important because my tent pegs have really been widened in the sense that I'm no longer not just mothering my biological children, I'm also mothering those that God has brought to me from the body of Christ. That's what I would say in short.
Thank you for that, Irene. And sometimes I wonder a little bit about this part of my calling, God at the center. Very often women will feel like there's so much to do or there's so many responsibilities. Is this even a calling, or can I ever get to my calling? The calling or responding to the calling seems like a distant dream or reality. How would you speak to somebody who says, but how do I answer the call on my life?
I suppose it is a journey because I've been there as well, where I've wondered, well, not even wondering, where I've actually looked at my work in the corporate world, in the secular world, as separate from what I do as what I would call a ministry. And I think it has to take deepening a relationship with God to realize that He is the one who is able to will and to do whatever you do in your life. And so if I am not able to understand a balance sheet, for instance, if there's something that is not clear, I have found that if I pray, that becomes clearer. So He's interested in everything about me. And because He's interested in everything about me and I anchor myself in Him, therefore He is everywhere and in everything that I do, especially if I allow Him to.
I like that sentiment. Thank you for that. And for the example that you have been to other women. And I think often, perhaps, when we speak about African women driving change in their communities, I'm sure many of them would start with their relationship with God being the motivator and the empowerer. So thanks for that response, Irene. Shelton, if I can come to you, perhaps you could, again, like we did with Irene, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your current roles, specifically regarding focus on women?
Yeah, first things, thank you so much for having me and just for the privilege of sharing the journey that I have been on. In this work, supporting families and children. So my current role, as you already mentioned, I'm doing some consulting work, but I'm also working with a local organization in Zimbabwe called Kudavana, which is a ministry that is looking after children. They have an institution, like a children's home, that they are transitioning into a family-based care or community-based care. So I have been working alongside them as their executive director as of February this year. So that's kind of something that I'm doing currently, but right in the midst of that, as you're transitioning to family-based care, we know that most of our caregivers are in this space are women. So I get the opportunity of seeing African women really leading change in their communities, particularly in this space of orphan care and vulnerable care of children, not only for their own children, but for other vulnerable children or children at risk in their own communities. So that's how I end up, getting to participate in this space. I should tell you this. I have two daughters. One is 16-year-old and one is 13-year-old. And I was telling them that, hey, I'm doing this symposium and we're talking about African women driving change. And my 13-year-old was like, why are you talking about it? Shouldn't that be something that the African women talk about? It's like, well, yeah. So it got me thinking a little bit, like, my role in this, how is that, relatable to the conversation? But I told her I get to celebrate what women are doing, and mostly in this space we have, women's voices are marginalized, and in my role and working in the space of orphan care and vulnerable children, I get to actually see what women are doing, and I get to come and celebrate that. So just that is my role, and just I've seen the connection to what I do, and the ministry I do, and my role participating in the symposium today, that I want to celebrate and to honor the many caregivers and women that have stepped forward and that are resilient in all manner of ways to ensure that they're leading change in their own community. So that's what I get to do, and I have the joy of celebrating that with you all as you commemorate Women's Month.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shelton. Before I let you go, I would like to honor the voice of your daughter, Caesar. That's part of what we're doing here today. And perhaps I could ask you a follow-on question to hers. What message would you give men on the African continent with regards to empowering women to drive change?
I'll say invite their voices, make space for their voices to be heard. Just like, as I said, I have two daughters, and I've seen that as a father, I have had to learn, as an African father, I've had to learn to just sit and listen. I joke that my kids are very assertive and they're driven, which is an amazing gift, but my response to them could shut them down, or my response to them could open opportunities for them to enter the marketplace, to enter the world, or even to journey with confidence, and knowing that their father really is full of confidence in who they are, but also that their Heavenly Father sees and has equipped them well enough to navigate the world. So I will say to the men in Africa, let's invite women to the table. Let's create space for them to continue to shine as they are, with their giftings in the different areas that God has equipped them to. So let's make space for them, and let's allow them the platform that they need.
Yeah, thank you. I see the value in that, Shelton. In fact, I mean, very often in the African context, men have the keys to the seats around the table. And so when we're seeing women around a table, it's because some man chose to open a door and allow a woman not just to sit there, but to speak and empower her voice and then take action on it. And so we're seeing more profound male influence in the development of women. So thank you for not only saying that, but showing up today. And perhaps your daughter can see that and be proud of the man that you are, that's making space for women like her to take up their space at the table. So thank you for taking that risk. It's not easy, I'm sure. And maybe we'll come to some of the risks that men face in empowering women in the African context. We'll come to that later, perhaps. In the meantime, perhaps, Irene, you can share a little bit about something that you're particularly focused on at the moment that builds women in your secular or your ministry. Which one focus do you have at the moment that you see the most that actually is building women? It's making space, but you see the woman coming to life, growing, changing, taking shape. What are you seeing?
What I'm seeing, I'd actually want to ride on what Shelton has talked about. Women are the caregivers. And for me, while my world has included both genders, women have been of particular interest to me because women are really the social glue that builds our communities. And it's interesting that and really gladdening to know that the men are opening up and allowing women a voice around the table. But it's interesting that even when they do not have a voice around the table, the resilience that women has shown is that they will continue to be caregivers. They will continue to build their societies. They will continue to help one another. So that, for me, has really made me realize that if we can empower women, if we can give women whatever they need to make them be more productive, however you measure that, then you have the capacity to actually touch more human beings in their communities than if you did not. And I know that there are research studies that have shown that if you support a woman, they will not only support their own children and immediate family, they will actually go and help members of the community. And I just want to pick on a conversation, if you'll allow me. I was in a conversation in Nairobi where I had gone to visit some of our programs, and they were supporting women. We were supporting women. And when you look at the books, they were paying up what they owed. I'm referencing microfinance here. They were paying up what they owed. But you saw that the businesses were not necessarily growing. And so I wanted to find out, why is that so? And the answer they gave me, some of them said, look, if my neighbor has a problem, I have to take some of my profit and I have to help them. If my neighbor who got a loan together with me is not able to pay, I have to take some of my profits and help them to pay, because tomorrow they'll pay for me as well. So the focus has always been on building communities. So for me, that is something that really makes me want to create an environment where women can be supported to do things that are long-term, long-lasting, because they have the capacity to spread. They have the capacity to help much more than we would expect them, even given very few resources, they're able to do that. So with that in mind, I'm always keen to support women.
If I can ask you a follow-on question, Irene, to that, I mean, you're talking about creating these environments. So what are some of the challenges that you face when creating this environment where there can be support and growth and that sort of thing?
One of an interesting challenge is that women are averse to risk. They won't see an opportunity and just jump in and grab it. So that might actually look like it's a negative thing. And usually we consider it a negative thing because it means that they take a little bit longer to get in. But I have chosen to consider it a positive thing, because that aversion to risk means that when you support them to the point that they actually move in and do what they are supposed to do, they will have grappled with all the risks they need to grapple with. They will have created the buffer that they need to create. And if they know that you are going to be there to support them, they'll fly. They'll fly. I hope that helps you understand my approach.
It does. Thank you, Irene. I really appreciate that. Shelton, perhaps you could share a little bit about some of the challenges you faced in this creating space, trying to support women and children. What some of the challenges that you've had to mitigate?
Yeah, we in our work with the local church, some of the challenges that we face is that there is still a lot of limiting traditional practices when it comes to allowing women space or even opportunity for them to lead, particularly when it comes to this space of orphan care. One of the things that we see is that because of the limiting traditional practices that sometimes undermine women's voice or their place in society, even though they are resilient and they are the backbone of the community. Sometimes some of the churches and even the leaders, church leaders, don't see this as an advantage. They actually see this as a threat to the ecosystem or the environment. So one of the challenges that we see is that sometimes that has minimized even women that are gifted, that they no longer want to step up and lead because of some of these kind of practices. So that's been one of the major challenges that we have seen, particularly in the rural setting, where we find that there is still some of those the cultural practices have a stronghold that we still are praying for God's leadership to kind of break some of that, just to bring freedom there. So that's been one challenge that I have just noticed, and some of these implications in working with caregivers and women, particularly in the rural settings. And then I think the other challenge is the lack of access to resources, or even just lack of resources to support any women empowerment, particularly when it comes to the church. And that's kind of the space that I work in, and I've seen, like, sometimes when I look at church budgets, like the overall annual budget of a church, you'll see what is allocated there sometimes tells a bigger story than what is being shared. And I think this is a challenge that we need to address, that the local church in Africa needs to address, to say we need to ensure that our budgets reflect the heart and where God is calling us to, particularly when it comes to empowering women, and giving access to resources, just like as Irene was sharing, that the economic empowerment that should start coming through the church. And we know that it's already happening in small ways, but we need to amplify that, through the microfinance. But it's been happening in the community, but it's not happening, through the local church. It's like, well, I do my microfinance in the community, but the church is not seeing this as a tool that they can use to capitalize and catalyze women within their own space. So that is a challenge that I see, just of lack of access to resources and lack of resources, and just even the knowledge within our local communities in Africa, for them to know the tools that are available for them to equip women. So those are some of the two challenges that I might just bring up.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shelton. And I wonder, Irene, how would you answer that challenge? What ideas would you have for a group that came to you saying, hey, these are our challenges? What resonates with you that you would want to share?
Actually, what Shelton shared does resonate with me greatly. And actually, when I did my PhD, one of the places that I went to try and get information was a village in Zimbabwe, in Gutu district. I spent a week in the village trying to hear the voices of poor people. And one of the, in fact, the key conclusion that I had from my research is that the church has a significant role in galvanizing leadership, because the church is the recognized authority in the community. They need to galvanize leadership to make sure that information is available. And again, quoting, I normally like to look at the early church, particularly Acts chapter 6, where the apostles were told there's a problem. The Grecian widows are not being given food because the Hebraic widows are hoarding everything. And the apostles said, appoint 7 people. We can't stop preaching the gospel. Appoint 7 people who will do this work. So the church was able to come up with solutions. So we need to come up with solutions. This is something that I'm passionate about. This is something that I'm working with the church. In my local setting, I do have a piece of work in the rural areas, and I'm working with the church to build their ability so that they can have a leadership that is focused on primarily their primary mandate, which is the spreading of the gospel. But they also need to have a strategy, some way in which they can make sure that food for today is on people's tables. And in most of our countries where we have high poverty rates, we also have resources that have been put aside. These resources may not necessarily be within the church framework, but they are also available to the churches. And therefore, one of the things that I think we can do, one of the things that I am committed to do, is to try and get this information and try and prepare the church leadership to access some of these resources. It reminds me of God telling the Israelites, go to your neighbors. You are now going to the promised land. Go to your neighbors. Go and get what you will need. I think pretty much the same is happening now. The world around us does have resources that can be made available, but we need to be strategic in locating ourselves in a way that will enable us to access those funds. And this is something that I think it's a skill, it's a capacity that we need to build in the church. Certainly where I am located, I'm beginning to start working with the church in that way. It's not the easiest thing, but it's not impossible.
Before we go on, I thought maybe it might be nice, Shelton, I'm not sure if you wanted to respond to the same question. How would you answer your own dilemma that you have presented? I'm sure you've seen it working somewhere. What are you seeing working that we can all borrow from?
Yeah, I totally agree with Irene. The church is in a very critical place in our communities, and it is a leading authority, and the church is made up of the people, and to me that we have some of the most creative, people in the continent, and I always laugh that when people talk of Zimbabweans, it's like, well, we make a plan, and that's just become something that we say that we'll make a plan. And I feel like our churches are full of creative people that are able to find solutions. So one of the key things that I have seen working, I have seen the church really opening up and really inviting tools that are normally not only centered around evangelism and discipleship, but tools that are now saying, how do we sustain and meet the day-to-day needs of our people? And this is now starting to even leaders going to access further education around community development, further education around areas of trauma-informed care counseling. That is a step that the church is really taking to say, we have to have the tools as a church to both scientifically, scientific proven and best practice tools, so that we're not just taking anything that everyone is bringing, but we are actually, helping the church to find evidence-based tools that will allow them to respond to the needs in their communities effectively. So we are seeing the church do that, and I love also what Irene is saying, that a lot of people are coming around the church and supporting the church in this endeavor, and that's a good thing. And that's something that we need to celebrate, that we have ministries like some of the organizations that we're working with that are really making it their mission to journey with the church, even as they start expanding their knowledge base and expanding their tools box to respond to the needs in their community, and particularly around empowering women. That the church is understanding that the women are the core caregivers and they're the backbone in their community, but how could they leverage and actually catalyze that, energy and synergy in their communities to really let them grow and have the space that they need. So I'm seeing that moving along, but I know that there is still more that we can do to equip the church. There's still more that we can do to create networking and collaborative spaces where the church could also see all of the other resources around them as things that they can use, as assets that they can build on, rather than try to do everything by themselves, which sometimes is a challenge, that the church tries to be everything to everyone, and they end up losing their their core business. That I always say, we don't want the church to become World Vision. Let World Vision and let non-profits be non-profits. Let the church be the church, but let's equip the church with the tools that it needs to do what it does well. So I hope that kind of shares some of my excitement and passion to say the church is a resource that we need to continue to build on. It is, although it is difficult, we should not give up on the church. And our pastors too. I feel like we have seen leaders that are now wanting to know more, that we want the theological training, but we also want to know how do we practically how do we practically respond to the needs of the people in our community and in relevant ways. And so that for me has been an exciting thing to see happening in various communities that we serve.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute there for a second. Thank you for that, Shelton, for sharing that. And it's triggered a bit of a thought inside of me, and I'm going to throw this your way, Irene. Hope it's okay. So we talk a lot about meeting the needs. We've repeated that statement a few times in the last 20 minutes, and empowering women. And I'm wondering a little bit, is empowering women about empowering them to meet needs? And meeting the needs of women so that we can empower them to meet needs of women and others, and then meeting the needs? Is it a cycle of meeting needs? And then when you ask the question, we're not World Vision. So what are we then? And what are we actually trying to do when we empower women? Towards what? To do what? What are we trying to achieve here if we're not World Vision?
It's a very good question. It's an interesting question. Actually, that question is what led me at master's level. I went and did theology and development studies because I was asking that question. And then it progressed into a further research. And I think that question itself needs to be unbundled. And my take on it is that what is the voice of the person we are serving? What are they saying? Does their voice count? Who should be determining what is the need? And for me, the conclusion, therefore, for me is we need to journey with people. And that is where the church becomes important. We need to journey with people, because if you ask, and again, the world of development has tried to identify needs in very different ways. You need to have basic accommodation, you need to have water, you need to have health, you need to have education. And then we moved on to you need to at least have $2 a day. And then we moved on to so many other things. But at the end of the day, and I think this is where the church really comes in, at the end of the day, we are empowering people. As far as I'm concerned, we are empowering people to be who God meant them to be, to have the voice that God gave them to have, to be able to determine the type of life that they think enables them to actually recognize, to live really the way that gives glory to God. So determining what need is going to look like needs to bring everybody that is concerned to the table. And it's only when the redemptive power of the Holy Spirit, of what God has done in our life, when that happens, then those that have identified the need and have been helped will go and help others. It stops being a box that we can tick, that we helped this community, now we want to move to the next community. It becomes a situation where we are saying we are a community, and within this community there are others who have and others who do not have. And so in the book of Acts chapter 4, 3 and 4, you find people are selling their homes and they're putting everything in the same kitty so that they can share out, because they're identifying the need together. So I've said quite a few things. I don't know if that is helpful, but I just feel that there is a point at which the voices of the women that we want to facilitate for must be taken into account. We need to be able to listen to them. And I think that action alone is such a huge level of empowerment before you do anything else.
I wonder about that. So thank you this is a beautiful opportunity for us to unpack this a bit. So Shelton, I'm going to come back to you in a second or two, but the unpacking of the needs cycle, that what we are about? I meet your needs, you meet the next person's needs, they meet the next person's needs. Or is there a calling to something greater in the church that says, my needs have been met, what am I giving that is about flourishing, that is about, I love what you said, Irene, being the person God created you to be. How am I enabling someone to be who that person's designed to be, which is beyond needs, isn't it? We're not talking Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. We're talking something else. We're talking self-transcendence into serving others, living outside of myself for the greater good of the church and other. And I'm wondering, do we get stuck in this needs cycle, and then the women are able to speak their needs? But when are we seeing the flourishing, the coming to life of the unique individual designed for something before the world even began? That woman, is she emerging? Shelton, are you seeing her emerging? Maybe share an example in your ministry. Where is that woman emerging in your work that is flourishing?
No, that is such I really get excited about this conversation. So if you see me getting, more passionate, please. But yes, I think I am seeing many women, just like it's, something has clicked, like almost like a key has been turned, new agency, new life. It's like, it's almost like it's been unlocked in some of the women that we have been serving. I shared a couple of slides, and maybe this might be a good place to kind of just, reflect this. And this is just one of the local churches that we worked with in Zimbabwe. And we had caregivers that are really taking care of vulnerable children, their own kids, and also they have taken other children, from their families that have lost, one parent or the other. And these caregivers were just, again, in Zimbabwe, we know the economy of Zimbabwe has had its own, really challenges, and it has affected particularly the women who are the primary caregivers. And we could see that through partnering with the local church, they were able to get a training on just skills training that really, it was working with them to identify what is it that we need, and what is our agency as women. And really the opportunity that the church was able to identify that and help them to unlock these skills really kind of almost gave them a new life, in their work and in what they were doing. So these women started making this, like, they call it detergent. So they said they taught them how to make detergent and soap, bar soap, and they start selling that. And that in itself just, again, opened up this almost this thing to this kind of like entrepreneurship, kind of like I can do this. I have skills that I can do this. And you could see just a different life or even different perspective of how they were now looking at the challenges that they were working on, and they're finding solutions to say, now I am able to sell this product that I have created by myself. I have skills that I have created this, and that really gave them a new perspective of that I can do anything, if someone comes alongside and help me identify what I'm good at. But they just needed that someone to kind of just like, hey, here is a space, here is a skill that you need. And that for me is just an example of the agency and the these African women that are really stepping into this. And the other one is on the care for the caregiver, around trauma care. And this is one of the key things that we started seeing, that sometimes, particularly in the space of care, of orphan care, we're seeing that women have experienced difficult things. And sometimes there is this assumption that they are caregivers, so they should just take care of kids, but no one has taken time to address some of the things that they have experienced. So what we are seeing, that working through the local church, we are starting to see, bringing tools like care for the caregiver, where you are having time to bring in tools that are helping women address some of the trauma and challenges that they have experienced, so that they can be able to identify it in the children that they are looking after, or even in other young women that they're mentoring. And we see that, wow, just the freedom when some of these women go through this training or these they're exposed to these tools, that the life that they just get to say, wow, I can now tell my story. I can now be a mentor and coach someone else who has gone through the same. That's something that I've seen many examples and stories like this. So these are the two that I wanted to just see that. And this turns into community. These women become community and a support system for each other. And for me, that is like, man, they are leading the change in the church. The women are leading the change in their community by stepping in and being vulnerable to address their own trauma and challenges, or things that have been really difficult, so that they could be better caregivers, not only for their own kids, but for the rest of the, for the rest of the community. So those are some of the two stories that I could just share. That, yeah, this gets me excited because, man, it is happening. It is happening, and women are leading the change, and praise God for
that. That for me is, I think the beauty of the conversation is to reach in and see the person behind the problem, behind the need. Because once the need is met, there's a whole other layer that the church is invited to. It's not just meeting needs, it's the next step that is possible because the need is met. And that's what you're saying, this key unlocking, this I can, this I can now be, I can now tell. You said I can about 50 times in 4 minutes. It's been beautiful to just see the light and the energy that's possible when the church steps in, because it's more than just I meet your need, you meet the next need, you meet the next need. It's something else is happening. Irene, I'm sure you've got 100 stories you could share. Could you choose something while Shelton was talking? I know you were burning inside, because there's a story that you can share with us of this new agency, this new life that happens as women are driving change in their communities.
Well, yes, I was really excited as Shelton was speaking, and just looking at those images, you see the liberation that women start experiencing. But allow me to just cross over and talk about women in the younger generation. These are women that are educated, they've gone to college, And they are in the church. They're very, very strong in the church. And I know certainly in my country, and I think a few other countries around, it's no longer that easy to find a job. So you might get all the qualifications that you need, and find that you are still in the street. A couple of days ago, I was listening to a story of a young man who trained as a doctor and is now working as a courier service, as a delivery man himself, because he could not find the job. And I think that's another area that the church needs to be open to. And I have had the opportunity to have a number of young women that have come to me and really to try and journey with them. I've got a number of stories where I've journeyed with young women, and we've asked the question, can you actually get a job? I can no longer continue staying with my parents. I need to look after myself, but I can't find a job. And so we start walking through the process. And this process is so much centered in what God has given you, who God is to you. And I have found that sometimes even just going to the first book, chapter 1 of Genesis, and saying, God created you in his image. If God remembered to put the capacity for a bean grain to have seed within it, if God remembered to do that, so that every bean that you harvest has the potential to be replanted, if God remembered to do that and he created you in his image, what capacity do you have? And so I have journeyed with young women in that conversation. And we've even come to a point, some of them have come to a point of saying, maybe I could start something on my own. Maybe waiting for a job is not going to work. I could start something on my own. And we've nurtured those ideas. It is the most frightening thing to happen for these young people to suddenly, because all they have known in their history, and what we as parents have said to them is, get trained. We pay for our children to go to universities, and because we want them to get a good job. Then they go out there's no job. So somehow we need to come back and say, what now do we do? And this is what I've been doing. And some of them have started businesses, but they need a hand to hold. It's a scary, scary space. They have to think about, who are my customers? What is the product? What do I need to put in? And they need people to journey with them. And again, to the point that Shelton said earlier on, we do have capacity in the church. We need to dig it up. We need to bring it up, because these young people should not be journeying on their own. These young women should not be journeying on their own. They need to journey with someone. And I think the church can facilitate for that, because these are going to be our sharpshooters for tomorrow. They will definitely make a change. But I know I'm holding the time, but let me just give you one example from way back there. We worked with women, and again, I'm talking about microfinance, and we worked with a church, and Shelton will be delighted to know that this work was actually in Zimbabwe. I was born in Zimbabwe, by the way, Shelton. So we did some work in Zimbabwe. And what was interesting, we also worked with women in the church in Ghana. What was interesting is that when their businesses started were being successful, and we helped them understand it's not all the cash that's in your hand, which is a profit. Figure out what your profit is. And once they figured out what the profit was, now you need to pay a tithe. And these women were so delighted that for the first time, they were actually able to pay a tithe from their earnings. So there are so many benefits that we can recount. And so really the church is at the center of making sure that women continue to change their communities.
Such a beautiful example. Also a little bit of a giggle with it. I kept thinking to myself, sure, I wonder if our male leaders realize how much earning potential is in the women in the church. There would be a lot more motivation to empower women, you know, if that's what it takes. But yeah, I did have a little thought in my mind. But it is a beautiful journey to see that, where someone can say, I can now participate in my church financially. I can meet my needs and someone else's needs, and I can take up that position that God has called me to before the foundation of the world, to either be a counselor or to be a farmer or to be holding the hand of somebody else because somebody's holding mine. It's a very beautiful picture that you've painted.